Yeah, we seem to keep crossing paths, nature of the beast. But yeah, I'd definitely be covering that as well, and then back to covering UFC 161 on Saturday. It's going to be a busy week, but I love nothing more than fight weeks.
Absolutely. So before I toss to Peter, let me just get your quick overview. What do you think about this UFC 161 card? It's gone through a few changes. It's had some late additions. Roy Nelson's come in. You mentioned him, but what's your feeling on this card in Winnipeg as a whole?
Well, you can't deny that, with the main event taking a hit, with losing the title fight with an Barao, there's no way to replace that. There's really no way to say, okay, we're going to step it up and give you another title fight. It's kind of unfortunate for Canada because I feel like they've slightly been robbed in the sense that, let's say, like when they went into Calgary at 149, they lost a bantamweight title fight there. And then you get into Winnipeg, and this is their first big promotional card there, and, they lose that kind of a main event that had so much behind it, and that was definitely going to excite the crowd. But I think that, the UFC, like they always said, that they always have somebody that can step up and fill in the voids. And I think that people are going to be surprised with the cool main event. Roy Nelson, you can't go wrong with that. He's a fan favorite, no matter how much, whatever the beef between he and Dana, there's always excitement to be expected from Roy Nelson. So Pat Barry, Sean Jordan, you got a LSU fullback going up against a kickboxing champ. You gotta love that kind of a matchup. So I feel like they've done the best that they could in the time that they had to, really fill the voids on the card. Maybe Winnipeg fans are feeling a little bit disgruntled, but, I'm sure that it's sold out. So I'm sure that the guys that are going and going to watch this, that are true MMA fans, are really going to enjoy themselves in the end.
Well, as our resident Canadian, Peter, that's a cue for you. How do you feel about this card right now? Do you think Winnipeg's getting hosed, or do you think it's working out?
I think that title is cursed when it comes north of the border. I mean, we never see that title get defended here. I think it's going to be a great night of fights in Winnipeg, home of the Winnipeg Jets. It's the fifth NHL city that UFC has visited. Only Edmonton and Ottawa have not held a UFC show. I think Rashad and Dan is a great main event. I like the undercard. The first 5 fights have Canadians on the card, but something's missing. That title fight is definitely missing from the card to the point where I don't think it will affect the buy rate per se. But it lacks that extra little punch at the top of the card. I mean, I would love to see a title fight headline the Winnipeg show, but I don't know. Maybe next time they're in Western Canada, they'll have a title defended. I mentioned before those 2 NHL cities, Edmonton and Ottawa. I've heard through other sources that of those 2 cities, Edmonton will probably get the next shot in 2014. So unfortunate for me that Ottawa will get the short end of the stick, so to speak. Maybe in late 2014 we'll get a fight night or something, who knows. But it is quick to mention that the Winnipeg Jets, the MTS Arena only holds 15,000 fans. The arena here in Ottawa holds 20,000.
Well, actually, that makes it kind of like a Las Vegas card, because when you go to the MGM Grand or the Mandalay Bay, it's like 15,000, 16,000. Isn't it, Heidi? I think that's about the attendance.
Yeah, thereabouts, yeah.
So, pretty similar sized venue. So, even though Ottawa can hold more, I'm sure that they're very happy that Winnipeg is sold out to the rafters for that size, because that's the same they'd do if they were in Vegas. So it means things are going well despite the changes to the card. And I want to pose a question to both of you that's on my mind, because I've heard this theory posed by several different writers and several different commentators that the card actually stepped up in marquee value by putting Rashad and Dan at the top, because some people feel Renan Barao is just not an established enough name in UFC. I mean, personally, I love his fights and I think he's great, but he is an interim champion and he hasn't been one for very long. So maybe in some ways it's actually more of a marquee card. Peter, you could answer that first, and then I think Heidi can go ahead after that.
I think it's still a marquee card. I think Renan Barao, I mean, this could have been his coming out party with a decisive victory against Andy Weiland, but we're going to have to wait and see on that one. But, they're really pushing the Rashad Dan to make that marquee main event something memorable. It's only going to be 3 rounds. It's not a 5-round fight. It is only a 3-round fight. So you got to think it's not going to be more of a stamina issue. It's going to be who can knock the other guy out, or who can basically, it's not a race. It's not a marathon. It's going to be a sprint. But I do think the added star value, I guess you could say, of Roy Nelson to this card could influence the marquee level of the fight, of the show. The only thing I would say is it's a shame we didn't get Nogueira on this fight either.
Mm. Yeah, Heidi, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Rashad Evans' resume, for example. I mean, the guy has wins over Tito Ortiz, Chuck Liddell, Rampage Jackson, Forrest Griffin, Michael Bisping. You know, the list goes on of the guys that he's defeated throughout the course of his UFC career. And you have, Dan Hendo. I mean, the H-bomb, man. You always wait for that excitement. Like, will he bring it back? Of course, he's had the wins over Hua and Fedor. And the recent loss to Machida was very uneventful, but this is the opportunity for both Rashad and Hendo to really rebound. One of them has to, obviously, from their last fights, which for both of them were kind of, just not really eventful. And I'm really excited to see one of them try to finish each other. I don't know that'll happen, but, the anticipation is always there, especially when you have somebody like Dan Henderson and the power that he has in his hands, or Rashad just coming back and I saw something where he said he was bringing the swagger back. Let's see if he can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rashad seemed very sure about that. Not only the swagger back, but just that he's keeping his focus very narrow and he wants to entertain the fans with each fight he has. And he even said so on the conference call. It's like a title shot, that's not what I'm worried about right now. If I don't go out there and entertain the fans and win exciting fights, then I'm not getting that title shot. So that's got to come first. And Dan Henderson said he's got unfinished business with John Jones. And until he gets through a couple of fights and gets back to that title shot that he thinks is still his, nothing else is resolved for him. He wants to get back to that second chance to fight John Jones.
I think.
Yeah, and then you have a.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about, the fact that he did say he has the unfinished business. And, we keep saying, he has to get a couple more wins. And it's so unfortunate that that's the case, being that he was, in fact, lined up to fight John Jones at 151. It's just crazy that circle hasn't come full course yet. That's a fight I definitely want to see. I mean, hopefully we see it before his 43rd birthday or, before he decides that, he's done with MMA.
Yeah. Go ahead, Peter.
I'll ask Heidi this first, and then Stevie, you can jump in. At 42 years old, Dan Henderson is the oldest UFC fighter. Do you think if he loses badly here in Winnipeg on Saturday night, do you think he's one step closer to retirement?
Oh, was that for me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. No, I don't see Dan Henderson saying that he's completely done if he loses. I mean, of course, that puts John Jones way out of arm's reach. But on the other hand, I just don't see it in him. I don't want to call him like the Brett Favre of MMA. But, in some aspects, you see still that he has that fighter spirit. And I don't know if you guys saw this, the countdown episode that was, prior to UFC 157, where he had said all these different things he had gone through in his personal life, and that, he's finally feeling at a phase where his mental game is back on track. So, I think that plays also a big part of it. He might have been going through some major life changes, leading up to 157, and, maybe now he's clear of all that. I just don't see that a guy like Dan Henderson can let the fact go that he has a belt in every other organization that he's ever fought in, with the exception of the UFC. I don't see him letting that go.
Yeah, I'm going to concur with that because the competitive drive that Dan Henderson has is Olympic level. I mean, the fact that he's still doing this past the age of 40 puts him into an elite category that's only other guys I can think of would be Randy Couture and Mark Coleman, and that's about it, because most people are not that competitive at the age of 40, and those guys were, and Dan Henderson still is, and he still has that drive, and he still has things left to do. And as Heidi said, now that his personal life is sorted out, things can only look up for him. He's got nothing else to do, and unless he takes a lot of devastating losses in a row to the degree that Chuck Liddell did, where he was getting knocked out in fight after fight after fight, I don't think Dan Henderson is calling it quits anytime soon.
No, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, he's got the resolve. I mean, he's 42, but that drive is still there. I'm just thinking if he gets beat badly, I mean, I just feel like he's not getting any younger. I think if he gets beat here and beat again badly in his next fight, it'd be two really bad losses if that happens. And I don't know.
Yeah, but he didn't really get battered in the Lyoto Machida fight. I mean, maybe it was a stylistically bad fight that he ended up on the wrong side of, but it's not like he took a clobbering.
No.
No, I looked up the fight metric on that, and Machida had 27 significant strikes. Hendo had 20, and they each wanted to take down.
Yeah, so,
Pretty uneventful.
yeah, and pretty even fight, and not one that he took any damage in. So I don't think that we can call that a significant loss for Dan. It's an unfortunate loss more than anything.
Now, Stevie, I'll start with you on this one. What do you think of Roy Nelson's slot on this card? Do you think he's going to pull off another victory?
Well, I did ask him about that on the conference call. It was like, do you think you're going to get a knockout? You've been on such a roll lately. And he said, no, Stipe is one of the top heavyweights in UFC. I wouldn't be fighting him if he was. I expect a great fight. I don't think I'm going to get the easy knockout. I think it's going to be a real tough battle. So I pretty much defer to his answer on that. I think he summed it up quite well.
Yeah, and, Stipe, of course, has the wrestling. But, you look at somebody like Roy Nelson, and he's good in all aspects. Against Verdum, we saw him get picked apart, and we saw him lose that fight, on a top-level fighter. But against these guys like, Mitrione, Congo, Herman, he's had them all meet his right hand, and there was nothing they can do about it. And, of course, Stipe, I've noticed, he comes forward a lot in his attack. And that is going to be very dangerous against a guy like Roy Nelson. And I don't know if you can teach that over the period of time that he's had to try to switch up your footwork, to switch up your head work, and really try to effectively utilize not circling into that dangerous right hand that he has. It's a tough fight for Stipe. But like Roy said, I talked to him also the other day, and he was saying that you'll never meet a more dangerous fighter than a man that's coming off a loss. And, for Stipe, that was, the case with his last fight. And, it'll be interesting to see if he can rebound from that and how hungry he comes out against Nelson.
Absolutely. Hey, now I want to talk real quick about the women's bantamweight fight, Alexis Davis and Rosie Sexton. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is UFC's first women's fight in Canada. So, Heidi, what are your thoughts on that fight?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is because we had the McMahon fight, the Tate and Zingano fight, and then, of course, Ronda and, Liz. And those, I think, were all on American soil. So we have Alexis Davis and Rosie Sexton, and, they're both, pretty even across the board if you look at what they've accomplished. They all, both have the submission as their strengths. They both have 13 wins. Alexis Davis came into the UFC ranked. She's, I think, at number 6. The last fight that she had in Invicta with that submission over Shayna Baszler, that entire fight was amazing. And the way that she was able to finish her, Baszler's toughness, not wanting to tap, she got that technical submission, the rear naked choke over her. She's fought, I think, Sarah Kaufman. She took a loss in that fight, but, she's got a good striking advantage also, I think, over Rosie. But, Rosie, if you think about it, she's kind of been a pioneer of women's MMA in the sense that she comes out of England. When she was coming up, there really weren't any kind of promotions that were featuring women. And she took a fight. I read this just the other day, her first fight. She took on 24 hours notice because she kept bugging a promoter that had women's fights to try to get on the card and to get herself a fight in the pro circuit. And she took her first fight on short notice. She took home a win, and she didn't lose until facing Gina Carano. So, she's got a lot to offer in this fight. And, except for that KO to Gina and the KO to Zoila in Bellator, she's been, tough as nails. It's going to be a fun one.